The wind howled through the frozen canyon, sharp and cruel like blades. Snowflakes danced wildly in the air, covering the ground in a thick white blanket. Derek pulled his jacket tighter and checked the heat gauge on his wrist device. The numbers blinked red dangerously low. This planet Verelanine was not meant for humans, but here he was, scavenging for parts and leftover tech from crashed alien ships. He had set up a small tent on the edge of a ridge, near a half-buried shuttle that he planned to explore the next day. Inside the tent, it was barely warm, but enough to survive. He lit a small heat unit and took off his gloves, his fingers numb and stiff. Just another cold night, he thought. Just another day in this frozen graveyard of forgotten machines. Then he heard a soft sound, like a weak breath or a whisper. His eyes narrowed, and he paused. Another gust of wind followed. But then again, that sound closer this time. He reached for his plasma knife, his heart beating faster. No one should be out here, not in this cold, not at this hour. Slowly, he unzipped the flap of the tent and peeked outside. At first, he saw nothing but the swirling snow. Then he spotted something, a shape, crawling toward the fire pit just outside. It was small, thin, and shaking terribly. Derek stepped out cautiously, the snow crunching beneath his boots. As he got closer, he saw it was a girl, an alien girl. She looked no older than 15, her skin a pale lavender, her hair soaked with ice. She was barefoot, barely dressed, and her lips were turning blue. "Hey," Derek said softly. Kneeling beside her, she flinched but didn't run. Her eyes, wide and glowing faintly green, looked up at him with fear and pain. "Can you hear me?" he asked. "Are you hurt?" She tried to speak, but only coughed, her body shaking, without thinking. Derek took off his sleeping bag and wrapped it around her small form. He carried her gently into the tent. Ignoring the frostbite in his hands, inside he placed her near the heat unit and zipped the tent closed. She lay still, wrapped in his only sleeping bag, her breath shallow. Derek gave her a sip of water and tore open a ration pack. She sniffed it, but didn't eat. Instead, she stared at him, her eyes wide and full of confusion. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now." The girl said nothing, but her eyes never left his face. She seemed scared, but not of the cold. It was as if she didn't believe someone could be kind to her. As the hours passed, the girl's breathing became steadier. Derek kept watch, still unsure if this was a trap. Was someone using her to lure him out? Was she part of a larger group? But nothing came. No ships, no lights in the sky. Just silence and snow. At one point, the girl sat up slightly, pulling the sleeping bag tighter around her. Her fingers were thin, shaking, but she pointed at the small fire unit and whispered a single word, "Warm." Derek nodded. "Yeah, that's heat. It'll keep you alive." She didn't respond, but her eyes softened, just a little. Later that night, she started coughing again, and Derek gave her more water. She finally took a few sips and looked around the tent. "No. Cage," she whispered, her voice raw and broken. Derek blinked. "What?" "No cage," she repeated, more firmly. "This time, it wasn't a request, it was a plea. I'm not locking you up," he said gently. "You're free here, okay?" The alien girl nodded slowly and lay back down for the first time. Derek saw something shift in her expression, relief, maybe even a trace of trust. She curled up inside the sleeping bag like a child hiding from the world. Derek sat nearby, pulling a spare cloth around his shoulders to keep warm. He looked at her again, still amazed. What was she doing out here, alone, half frozen in a wasteland? Why did she look like she hadn't eaten in days? And who had put her in a cage? That night, Derek didn't sleep much. He kept the fire alive, kept an eye on her, kept wondering what he had just brought into his life. But deep down, something inside him had already decided he wasn't going to let her die. Not out here, not alone. Asterisk morning came slowly on Virula 9. The snow outside was quieter now, but the cold remained bitter and sharp. Derek rubbed his eyes and sat up, stiff from sleeping on the hard floor of his tent. He turned to the sleeping bag near the heater, where the alien girl still lay wrapped up. She was awake, but she wasn't. Moving, her eyes stared at the roof of the tent as if waiting for something bad to happen. Derek reached for a new ration pack and opened it carefully. He placed it near her. "Try to eat this," he said softly. But the girl didn't respond. She just looked at the food, then at him, then away. Derek sighed and sat down across from her. "I don't know your name," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You showed up in a snowstorm, almost frozen, and I helped you. I don't want anything in return," he added quickly, seeing her expression tighten. "I just want you to live." The girl blinked slowly. Her lips cracked from dryness. She pulled the sleeping bag closer to her chin, as if afraid he'd take it back. A few minutes passed in silence. Derek didn't push. Instead, he took a bite from another ration and chewed quietly. He knew what fear looked like. He had seen it in war. And this girl, this alien child, was full of it later that day. Derek left the tent for a while to check the nearby crash site. He didn't go far. Just enough to scan for tech parts and make sure no one else was around. His scanner picked up traces of heat from the west. Old, maybe, but worth watching. When he returned to the tent, the girl was still there, still wrapped in the sleeping bag. But something had changed. The ration pack was half-eaten, and her eyes met his, just for a moment, before looking away again that night. Derek set up a second heater. He placed it closer to her side, trying to give more comfort. The girl looked at it and then looked at him. Still, she said nothing. "Do you understand me?" Derek asked gently. She nodded once. Finally, a sign. "Are you hurt?" he asked next. She shook her head slowly. Another answer. "Progress." Derek smiled a little. Relieved. "I'll call you Star, until you tell me your real name," he said, with a soft grin. The girl didn't react, but her eyes flicked toward him again. As the night deepened, Derek sat with a small notebook, drawing sketches of the shipwreck outside. Suddenly, he felt a tug on his sleeve. He turned, surprised. It was her. She had crawled a little closer and now sat just beside him, shivering slightly despite the heaters. Derek didn't move. He didn't want to scare her. She pointed at the sketch of the ship, then at herself. "You were in that ship?" he asked. She nodded. Derek frowned. "Were you running away?" Her face went pale, and she looked down quickly, hugging the sleeping bag. He waited, and then, very softly, she whispered, "No more cages." Derek's breath caught. This was the second time she had said that. "Did they keep you locked up?" he asked. She didn't speak, but her silence was answer enough. Tears welled up in her glowing eyes, and she turned her face away. Derek reached into his bag and pulled out a small cloth. He handed it to her without saying anything. She took it slowly, gently wiping her eyes. He didn't push her for more. He just sat beside her, letting the quiet speak instead. That night, they sat by the heater together, not talking, not moving much. But something had changed. The distance between them had shrunk. A silent wall had started to crack before going to sleep. Derek adjusted her blanket again. As he did, she reached out, very slowly, and touched his hand. It was the softest touch, like a feather. Her fingers were cold, but not shaking as much now. She looked up at him and whispered one more word. "Thank you." Derek nodded, his voice low and warm. "You're safe here, Star," he said. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but I'll be here, okay?" She nodded, just once, and lay down again, this time without fear. In her eyes, and for the first time since she had appeared in the snow. She closed her eyes without trembling. Derek watched her for a while, then leaned back and looked up at the tent roof. Who was this girl? What kind of place had she escaped from? And what would happen when those who lost her realized she was missing? The cold wind outside howled once again, but inside the tent, warmth had returned not just in the air, but in the silence they now shared. The air was heavy before sunrise. Something had changed, and Derek could feel it. He woke up suddenly, heart pounding, the kind of feeling that didn't need words. Instinct, sharp, like a blade, told him something was coming, something bad. He looked at the alien girl Star still curled up in the sleeping bag. She was breathing softly now, peaceful for once, but outside the wind carried a sound. Low and distant, a hum, a vibration, engines. Derek's eyes widened. He unzipped the tent just enough to peek out in the distance. Cutting through the snow were 3 dark ships flying low across the white plains. Military, not transport. They were scanning, their lights sweeping over hills and wreckage. Star suddenly sat up, as if she felt them in her bones, her eyes locked with Derek's. Wide with panic. "Hide," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please." "Hide me." Derek didn't ask questions. He grabbed his jacket and motioned for her to follow. They crawled out the back flap of the tent, the one hidden by rocks and snow. His crawler, half-buried scavenger vehicle was nearby. Not much, but it had a hollow space under the storage bay. "Just big enough? Get in," he said. Lifting the hatch, Star hesitated for only a second, then crawled in. He covered the hatch with snow and metal panels, blending it into the landscape. Then he walked calmly back to the tent, as if nothing was wrong. As if he was just a man camping in the cold. Minutes later, the ships landed nearby, snow blasted. Around them, as the engines cooled, the doors opened, and 5 tall figures stepped out. Not human, not friendly. They were armored, with sharp helmets and glowing blue visors. Derek recognized the symbols on their armors. Alari Hunter Command, elite trackers. He had seen them once during the Orion War. They didn't ask, they didn't wait. They hunted. One of them walked toward him, boots crunching in the snow. Derek stayed calm. Warming his hands by the heater outside the tent, he acted like nothing was strange. "You there?" Lead Hunter said in a deep voice. "You? Seen anyone else out here?" Derek shook his head slowly. "Just me," he said. "Trying to survive and salvage some wrecks. Got permission from the Salvage Council. Check my ID if you want." The hunter didn't move. He stared, silent for a moment. Then he said, "We're tracking a target. Small, female, dangerous, escaped property." Derek's fists tightened slightly. He kept his voice flat. "Haven't seen anyone." The hunter leaned closer. "You sure about that? Human?" Derek nodded. "Pretty sure I'd remember if someone came knocking." Another hunter walked past, scanning with a handheld device. It beeped once, near the tent. Derek's heart skipped. The hunter looked up, but then the device went silent. "Again, just old heat signatures," he said. "Probably from this guy." The lead hunter looked back at Derek. "If you see anything," he growled, "you report it. Immediate execution for aiding fugitives." Derek gave a slow nod. "I don't plan to die out here," he replied. The hunters left after a few minutes, boarding their ships. The engines roared as they flew off, heading east. But Derek didn't move until they were gone from sight. Only then did he run back to the crawler and uncover the hatch. Star was shaking inside, her eyes wide with fear. Tears had frozen on her cheeks. "They were here," she whispered. "They found the crash, didn't they?" Derek helped her out gently. "Yeah," he said, "but they didn't find you." Star clung to his arm. "I don't want to go back," she said, voice breaking. "I'd rather freeze." "You won't go back," Derek said firmly. "I won't let them take you." Star looked up at him, confused. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the sky, where the ships had vanished, then back at her. Because no one should be hunted for existing, they returned to the tent that night. But neither of them slept. Derek kept watch with his plasma knife close. Star stayed curled in the corner, her eyes never closing. Outside, the snow began to fall again. Quiet, slow, soft. But now they both knew this planet was no longer safe. And whoever wanted Star back wasn't going to stop. Asterisk, the fire inside. The tent burned low. Its soft glow painted shadows on the canvas walls. Derek sat cross-legged, tired but alert, across from him. Star sat silently, wrapped tight in the sleeping bag he had given her. Outside, the wind screamed across the snow. But inside, there was stillness. A stillness that begged to be broken. Derek leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said, "but I think I deserve to know who I'm risking my life for." Star looked down at her hands. Her thin fingers trembled slightly, though not from the cold. For a long moment, she didn't speak, just stared at the fire, her eyes far away. Then, very softly, she began to talk. "I was born in a palace," she said, "but I was never treated like a daughter." Derek blinked in surprise. "A palace?" Star nodded slowly. "My father was one of the high commanders of the Zellery Empire. But when I was born, something was wrong with me." She touched her chest lightly. "My heart was weak." She whispered, "Too soft," they said. "Too emotional." She looked up at Derek, her eyes watery. "In my world, that's a defect they don't want. Children who cry or feel too much. So they ordered me to be removed." Derek felt his throat tighten. "Removed?" He repeated quietly. "They called it a mercy cleansing." She said, "Servants were told to take me away. But one of them couldn't do it. She helped me escape and hid me for years. But we were caught." She paused, took a shaky breath, then continued. "They put me in a containment facility. Like a lab, but also like a prison. I didn't have a name there. Just a number. They tested me, trained me, tried to make me forget what I was." Derek couldn't speak. He just listened. His hands clenched at his sides. "One day," Star said, "there was a power failure. A ship crashed nearby. I escaped during the chaos." She touched her shoulder, revealing a faint scar. "They shot at me," she whispered. "But I ran. I ran until the cold took me." She looked at him now, with both fear and hope. "I didn't think I'd survive, but then I saw your fire." Silence followed, heavy and raw. The only sound was the wind tapping against the tent. Derek finally spoke. "So that's why they're after you. You're the daughter of one of their own." Star nodded to them. "I'm a failure," she said. "An embarrassment that must be erased." Derek stood up and paced for a moment. His mind raced. He wasn't just hiding a runaway. He was protecting someone who was considered a threat to a brutal empire. Someone they'd send an army for. "You could have died out there," he said. Star's voice was quiet. "I was ready for that, but then you gave me warmth. You didn't know me, but you gave me your only sleeping bag." She looked up at him. "No one's ever done that for me. Not even the ones who claim to care." Derek stopped pacing and met her gaze. "What do you want now?" he asked. "Where do you want to go?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Anywhere that isn't a cage." She took a breath. "Anywhere. With you." Those words hit Derek harder than he expected. He had spent years alone on forgotten worlds, scavenging and surviving. But now, in this freezing tent, with a girl who had suffered more than he could imagine, he felt something warm stir inside his chest. He knelt beside her and placed his hand over hers. "Then we run," he said. "We run far away from here, stars." Eyes widened. "You'd do that?" Derek nodded. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. "Not again." She blinked fast, then reached into the sleeping bag and pulled out a small metal chip. "This," she said, "is the only thing I took from the lab. It's locked. But it has everything: codes, names, maybe even safe routes." Derek looked at it carefully. "We'll figure it out," he said. "We'll use it to stay ahead." She gave him a soft, broken smile. "I gave you my truth," she whispered. "And you gave me a choice." That night, they didn't sleep much. They sat close, making plans, sketching maps on torn paper. Every minute was dangerous now, but neither of them felt alone anymore. Outside, the hunters would return soon, but inside, in that little tent lit by firelight and trust, a new bond had formed. Not of blood, not of duty, but of choice. The wind howled louder the next morning. Derek stood at the top of the ridge, scanning the horizon through cracked lenses. The sun was barely rising, but the sky had turned a soft violet. He knew this light wouldn't last. They had to move. And fast, inside the tent. Star was packing what little they had: rations, spare heat cells, the metal chip she had saved from the lab. Her hands still trembled, but her eyes were clear now. She wasn't the same frightened girl who had crawled into the snow. She had made her choice, and so had Derek. Their plan was risky. Cross the ice fields to the south, reach the abandoned tunnels near the old mining colony. From there, hijack a signal beacon and send a false distress call, one that would lead the hunters away. Then vanish. Derek returned to the tent, brushing off snow from his jacket. "They're coming," he said. "We leave now." Star nodded without speaking. She pulled the sleeping bag close and stared at it for a moment, then folded it gently and handed it to Derek. "You'll need it," she whispered. They left nothing behind, not even a trace. Derek melted the tent with a low-heat charge so no one could find it. Then they set off, trudging into the deep white wasteland where everything looked the same. The ice cracked beneath their boots. The wind burned their faces, but they didn't stop. By midday, the sun disappeared behind thick clouds. The temperature dropped again. Star stumbled once, falling to her knees. But she pushed herself back up without a word. Derek looked at her, worried. She was strong, but her body had suffered so much. "Do you need to rest?" he asked. She shook her head. "Rest is death out here," she replied softly. Derek gave a small smile. "You sound like a soldier." Star looked at him, eyes distant. "I was trained to survive," she said, "but not to live." They continued moving. Following the pulse scanner Derek had strapped to his arm. It blinked slowly green, meant they were still hidden from trackers. But one red flash would mean they had been spotted. As night fell, they reached a massive crevice in the ice. Derek activated his handheld torch and shone it downward. A narrow path led into the dark. "This is it," he said. "Old mining tunnel should be below." He helped Star down carefully, step by step. The ice walls closed around them like a frozen throat. Every sound echoed: footsteps, breaths, even the beat of a heart. They reached the bottom and found a sealed hatch covered in frost. Derek placed a small device on it, a codebreaker he had built from scrap. It sparked and hissed for a moment before the hatch clicked open. Inside, darkness waited. Star hesitated. "What if it's a trap?" Derek looked at her gently. "Then we face it together." She nodded and stepped inside. The air inside was still and stale, but warmer than the surface. Rusty lights flickered above as they moved deeper into the tunnel. Dust covered the walls, and old machines lay frozen in time. After an hour of walking, they reached an old control room. Derek activated the beacon panel and began working. "Once I send the signal," he said, "they'll chase it, but we'll be long gone by the time they realize it's fake." Star stood near the doorway, her eyes scanning the shadows. Suddenly, her hand tightened on the doorframe. "Derek," she whispered, "I hear something." He froze, listening. A soft thump, then another. Not footsteps, not wind, but wings. Sky hunters, Derek hissed. They were fast-moving drone scouts, shaped like insects with razor wings. They must have followed the heat trail without wasting a second. Derek grabbed Star's hand and pulled her deeper into the tunnels. The beacon was still powering up behind them. They ran through the narrow halls, boots slamming against metal and ice. Sparks flew as a drone sliced the air behind them, barely missing Derek's shoulder. He turned and fired once. The drone exploded in a shower of metal shards. But others were coming. He and Star dove through a broken vent, crawling through rusted pipes until they dropped into a lower chamber. For a moment, it was silent. Just heavy breathing and the drip of melted ice. Star clutched her side. Scratched, but alive. "Are we safe?" she asked, voice shaking. Derek checked his scanner. The beacon had finished. The false signal was sent. "They're going the wrong way now," he said with a grin. "We bought ourselves time." Star smiled faintly through the pain. "You didn't let go," she whispered. "When they chased us, you never let go of my hand." Derek looked at her. "I told you," he said. "We run together." Asterisk snow blasted against their suits as they climbed the final ridge. In the distance, barely visible through the storm, stood Firebase C9, a black, steel structure built into the mountainside, with smoke rising from hidden vents. It was old, half abandoned, but still alive with power. It was their last hope. Derek helped Star over a frozen boulder. She was limping now, her legs scratched from their crawl through the tunnels. He had wrapped it with cloth, but the cold made it worse, just a little further. He whispered. Star nodded, biting her lip to keep from crying out. She wouldn't slow him down. Not now. Not when they were so close. The scanner on Derek's wrist blinked yellow motion nearby. But it wasn't drones this time. This signal was coming from inside the firebase. Oh. They reached the steel doors and knocked in the pattern Derek remembered. 3 slow, 2 quick, then hold. A voice crackled through a speaker. "Who's there?" "Derek Kane," he answered, pressing his glove against the panel. The scanner read his ID chip. After a moment, the door slid open, hissing as warm air spilled out. Inside stood a tall, rough-looking man with metal implants on his Jorig rig. Raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think I'd ever see your ugly face again." He grinned. Derek smirked back. "I could say the same." Then Rig saw Star, limping behind him. His grin faded, replaced with quiet confusion. "You brought company." "She's not a threat," Derek said quickly. "She needs help." Rig didn't respond, but he stepped aside and let them enter. Inside was warmer, filled with flickering lights and the hum of old generators. Rig led them to a side room where Star collapsed on a bench, breathing hard. "You look like hell," Rig said, handing Derek a drink. "And you smell worse." "We need a ship," Derek said, straight to the point. "Something fast, off-grid. Can you help?" Rig scratched his chin, then looked toward Star again. "Depends," he said slowly. "What exactly did you get yourself into?" Derek didn't answer right away. Rig gave him a sharp look. "You're asking me to risk my base, my life, and my resources? At least tell me why." Derek sighed and lowered his voice. "She's not just any girl," he said. "She's a Zalari commander's daughter. They tried to kill her, and now they're hunting her." Rig went quiet. The room suddenly felt colder. "You brought a war to my doorstep," he muttered. Derek leaned forward. "She's not their soldier. She's a child who survived things no one should. She doesn't deserve what's chasing her." Rig stood up and walked to the other side of the room. "I'll see what I can do," he said flatly. "Rest here, I'll call you when it's ready." Derek didn't like the tone in his voice, but he nodded anyway. Star looked up at him, her eyes worried. "Can we trust him?" she asked quietly. Derek hesitated. "We served together once," he said. He saved my life. During a riot on Lunar 6, I think we can trust him, but deep down, something gnawed at his chest. A memory, a warning. A voice from his past saying, don't trust old debts. Hours passed. They stayed hidden in the guest quarters. Away from cameras and eyes, Derek patched up Star's leg, and she finally fell into a deep sleep. He stayed awake, hand on his blade. Then the alarm blared. Red lights flashed through the corridor. A voice boomed over the speakers. Zellery command ship incoming, prepare for inspection. Derek's heart stopped. He ran to the door, opened it, and found Rig waiting with a grim face. You betrayed us, Derek growled. Rig didn't look proud. They offered me immunity, he said. Wiped records, supplies, even a cruiser. I couldn't say no. She's a child. Derek snapped. She trusted me, and I trusted you. Rig raised a weapon. Step aside, Derek, he said. I don't want to shoot you. But Derek didn't move. Instead, he threw a smoke charge and pulled Star from her bed. She was half awake, confused, but followed him as alarms rang. They ran through the base, dodging guards and drones. Doors slammed shut behind them, and Rig's voice echoed through the halls. Don't do this, Derek. But he didn't stop. He kicked open the supply room and spotted an old skybike. Not much, but it would fly. He threw Star onto it, jumped behind her, and hit the ignition. The walls shook as the base was breached from above. Zellery troops were entering now, their boots crashing like thunder. Derek flew the bike straight through the cargo tunnel, a narrow pipe full of dust and sparks behind them. Rig stood alone in the control room, watching them disappear into the cold sky. His fingers tightened into fists. But he didn't shoot. He just whispered. You always were the stupid one. And Derek, far away now, whispered back to no one. But I'm not the one who gave up his soul. The skybike sputtered as it dove between cliffs. Smoke trailed behind it, warning of a failing engine. Derek held the controls tight, wind cutting his face like glass. Behind him, Star gripped his waist, her face buried against his back. They had escaped Firebase Z9, but the Zellery weren't far behind. A cruiser now flew high above the peaks, scanning with heat signatures. They had only minutes left. Maybe less. I see the canyon, Derek shouted over the wind. Star lifted her head, eyes wide as the snow glow revealed a narrow crack between two frozen cliffs. Will it hide us? She asked. It has to, he replied. The skybike dove in, scraping ice as it slid into the hidden path. Darkness swallowed them, and the roar of the cruiser above faded slightly. Derek slowed the engine and let the bike coast to a stop deep. Inside the frozen canyon, they jumped off quickly, covering the bike with snow and rock. Star leaned against the wall, breath shaking. We can't keep running forever, she whispered. Derek didn't answer. He stared into the dark, thinking. Then he said, No, we don't run anymore. Star turned toward him, confused. What do you mean? I'm going back, he said. Her eyes widened in shock. No, you can't. They'll kill you. Derek stepped forward and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. You're still the target, he said. They want you because of who? You are, if I distract them. You'll have time to reach the old port, but you'll be alone, she said, voice trembling. You'll be captured, he smiled softly. I was alone before I met you, but for the first time, I feel like I have something worth fighting for. Star grabbed his arm, tears welled in her eyes. Don't leave me, she whispered. You gave me warmth, hope, freedom. Don't take it away. I'm not, Derek said. I'm making sure you get to live, truly live. She sobbed quietly, her forehead pressing to his chest. I gave you my heart, she said. I never asked for yours. But I think I have it. Derek didn't speak. He just held her, tightly, like it was the last time. And maybe it was. Minutes later, he was gone. Back on the bike, flying through the frozen sky. Heading straight toward the enemy ship, he activated his old combat beacon, lighting up his signal like a flare. They would chase him, and they did. Above, the Zelari cruiser changed course, its engines roaring as it followed the human heat signature. They thought they had found both of them. They were wrong. Back in the canyon, Star wiped her tears. She didn't run. She waited. Hours passed. The sky darkened. She climbed higher through the cliffs until she saw it, a fight. In the far distance, flashes in the snow, smoke rising, and then silence. She stared for a long time, heart frozen like the air around her. Then she turned and ran toward the old starport Derek had told her about, step by step, breath by breath. Weeks passed. She stayed hidden, moved carefully from world to world, but no matter how far she traveled, one thought never left her. He never came back, until one day, on a border moon, far from the Zelari Empire, she heard whispers at a marketplace. A Terran man found in the desert, half dead. Fought off for hunters with one arm and a broken blade. Still breathing, Star dropped the food she was carrying and ran. She found him in a clinic, barely conscious, covered in scars, one eye swollen, ribs taped, but alive. Derek opened his eyes slowly as her hand touched his. Star. He whispered. She smiled through tears. You came back, she said. You stupid human. You came back. He smiled weakly. Couldn't let you have all the freedom without me. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. This time, there were no more cages, no more running, only the warmth of two hearts that had found each other in the coldest places.